Genius Kids. Cultivating love for learning.
Chapter 8. Friction. Knowledge acquisition. Friction is the force that resists the relative motion. It always acts in the direction opposite to that of motion. Friction is a kind of contact force and is affected by the nature of interacting surfaces. Discussion. Jack. My bicycle stops because of force and it rides because of force. Which is that force that can bring my bicycle to rest when brakes are applied? Susie. It's friction or frictional force or force of friction. Jack. What is friction? How does it act? What are the factors affecting? Susie. Stop, Jack, even I have to go through the chapter. Come, let's study about friction. Friction. Definition. The force that resists the relative motion of one body over another, is called friction. Direction of action of frictional force. Frictional force always acts in a direction opposite to that of motion. Examples of action of frictional force in our daily life. 1. Friction allows a moving bus to stop when brakes are applied. 2. Football comes to rest on a floor due to friction. 3. Walking on a slippery floor with little friction is difficult. Factors affecting friction. Factors that affect the force that is acting in opposition to motion include 1. Nature of surface on which the body is being moved. 2. Nature of surface of the body which is being moved. 3. Pressure on the body which is being moved. So, you can easily make out that it is the roughness or smoothness of the surface that determines friction. Cause of friction. Magnified view of surface shows that every surface has some irregularities on its base. If irregularities of one surface get fitted into the irregularities of the other surface, it is called interlocking of irregularities. The interlocking of these irregularities is responsible for friction. The force required to overcome this opposition to cause motion is the frictional force. Since friction arises because of interlocking of irregularities, so same force would be required to overcome these interlockings, and that force is force of friction. Further, interlocking of irregularities between two surfaces becomes more prominent with increasing weight of the moving body. This is the reason why a slim person can move swiftly and a heavy person moves slowly. Types of friction. 1. Static friction. Static friction is the friction between two non-moving surfaces, or it is the friction between two resting surfaces in contact. Static friction is the force that resists the initiation of movement of objects. The force that is needed to overcome static friction is called static frictional force. 2. Sliding friction. The friction between two sliding surfaces in contact is called sliding friction. At the time of sliding, interlocks are not formed but irregularities do strike each other, thus generating sliding friction. Critical thinking. Spring balance is a device that is used to measure the force acting on an object. Spring balance consists of hook and pointer attached onto different ends. When a hook is pulled, pointer moves over a graduated scale indicating force acting upon the object or hand pulling the spring. It also opposes the motion between the two surfaces in contact. The force that is needed to overcome sliding friction is called sliding frictional force. 3. Rolling friction. When an object rolls over a surface, then the irregularities between the two interlock. This generates rolling friction. But in the case of rolling motion, the area of contact is much less as compared to sliding motion and static motion. So, rolling friction less than sliding friction less than static friction. The force that is needed to overcome rolling friction is called rolling frictional force. It is for this reason that new design suitcases have wheels so that they can be rolled on instead of sliding them. 4. Fluid friction. Fluids include air and water. The medium that can flow is called fluid. Friction exerted by fluid is called as fluid friction or drag. Force that is needed to overcome fluid friction is called as fluid frictional force. Examples of fluid friction include: 1. Aeroplanes need to overcome air friction during flight. Ships need to overcome friction due to water. 2. Hair dries up in air due to air friction. Factors affecting fluid friction include: 1. Speed of the object. Higher the speed, greater will be the fluid friction exerted on the object. 2. Shape of the object. Streamlined bodies face less fluid friction. 3. Nature of the fluid. Viscous fluid as oil offers more friction as compared to fluids of less viscosity. Critical thinking. Limiting friction is the friction that acts when the body is just about to move. Advantages of friction. 1. Friction exists between our feet and the floor. That's why we are able to walk and stand comfortably on the ground. 2. Vehicles can be driven on the roads due to friction between tires and the road. 3. We are able to write on a paper due to the friction between pen point and the paper. 4. Friction allows us to tie a knot between the two surfaces, say two ropes. 5. Friction allows us to light up a matchstick. 6. Friction allows us to sew our clothes. So, friction is a boon for sure to sustain our life. Disadvantages of friction. 1. Friction opposes motion, so energy is wasted to overcome the frictional force so as to allow the movement of the body. 2. Energy applied to overcome friction gets converted into heat energy. This heat is unwanted and unnecessarily raises the temperature of a body. For example, in the case of a motor, its insulation of windings gets melted up by heat, as a result of which motor gets burned. 3. Since motors etc. run with the help of electric power, power consumption of the electrical appliances is more because of the energy required to overcome friction. This increases our electricity bills. Methods opted to reduce friction. Friction is directly proportional to the roughness of surface. So, the only way to reduce friction is to make the surface smooth. Methods adopted for smoothing of surface include: 1. Polishing. Polishing of a surface smoothens it. For examples, jewels of watches are polished so as to hold axles between them. 2. Lubrication. Lubrication also reduces friction. By application of a lubricant, friction between two surfaces is reduced because then the surfaces of the two objects do not rub against each other. Instead, lubricated surfaces rub against each other, which have much less friction as compared to original rough surfaces. For example, face powder is sprinkled on carom board so as to reduce the friction between the striker and the carom board. Fans are greased and cycle parts are all so as to reduce the friction. Critical thinking. Light takes 13 seconds to reach the earth from the sun. 3. Ball and bearings. As we have already discussed that rolling friction is less than sliding friction, so usage of ball and bearings can reduce the friction by replacement of sliding friction by rolling one. 4. By use of a layer of air or avoiding direct contact. As seen in the case of hovercraft, introduction of layer of air between hull and the water reduces the friction between the two. 5. By streamlining of moving bodies, nature has given birds and fishes streamlined bodies. So, on similar ground, bodies of aeroplanes, rockets, cars are streamlined to reduce friction with air. Bodies of ships and boats are streamlined to reduce friction with water. Methods opted to increase friction. Friction can be increased by allowing the interlockings of two rough surfaces to entangle up more closely. This can be achieved by allowing the two surfaces to press together more strongly. As in the case of car brakes, brake pads press against moving parts of the vehicle very strongly, causing the friction to increase, resulting in the stopping of motion of a vehicle. Critical thinking. Tires of racing cars made smooth to reduce friction. Such tires are called slicks, while the tires of ordinary cars have grooves to increase friction and hence their grip on the road. Continuous review. Friction is the force that resists the relative motion. Friction can be of 4 types: sliding, rolling, static, and fluid friction. Friction is advantageous as it allows us to walk, stand, sew clothes, and light up a matchstick, etc. Friction can be disadvantageous because it increases heat generation and power consumption, etc. Friction can be reduced by lubrication, polishing, and by the use of ball and bearings.